Hi, I'm Samantha Johnson. I'm a Senior Assistant Director for Career Education at the Boston University Center for Career Development. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And in this video, we'll be talking about resume writing. There are other videos in this series that cover some introductory concepts, formatting for a resume. And in this video, we're going to focus on content creation, the bullet points and the content that supports your various experiences. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so we'll go ahead to the next slide. So there is a separate video on the Center for Career Development, also referred to as the CCD. And that video will go into much more depth in terms of who we are, who we serve, and the various services and resources that you're able to access. But for this video, I did want to provide a little bit of information about the CCD. So first, we are open to BU students at any level, undergrad students, graduate students, PhD students from any BU school and college. We also serve BU alumni throughout their lives and careers. In terms of our services, we offer individual appointments, workshops, as well as employer events, including career fairs. And lastly, we work with folks throughout their career journeys, whether you're involved in a decision-making process around something career-related, or you're exploring academic and career options, potentially you're getting prepared for an internship or a job search, or maybe you're evaluating and negotiating an offer. We help with all of that and much more. So as I mentioned, we're going to be discussing the content on your resume. There's a good bit on this slide. We're going to take it piece by piece and talk through it together. At the top of the slide, you'll see an equation that you keep in mind as you're trying to communicate your impact through that content. So as we discussed in the formatting video, your resume has experiences on it, and those have supporting statements that fall below each experience. And typically, we recommend formatting those statements in a bulleted list. So for each statement or each bullet point, you should start that with a strong action verb. And we'll get into this in a minute of what that means, but strong action verb, then you're going to actually describe the task where you performed that action or used that skill. And then you should be thinking about ending with what's the result, what's the reason for doing this, or how did you do it? So for the first bullet point on there, start with a focus on what you did. That's that action verb. Have your bullet points be action-oriented. You should use action verbs that are specific rather than generic. So you shouldn't be using stuff like worked or helped, aided, or even supported. Try to emphasize the role that you took. When you see helped, I'm led to automatically thinking, how did you help? What did you do? What was the actual action that you took? So for the verb tense of these action verbs, you should be using present tense for all experiences that are ongoing or bullet points that are ongoing. And if it's a past experience, you should be using past tense for all the bullet points that fall underneath that experience. The next, specifics, indicate the tools, techniques, and skills that you used within that bullet point or experience. Where possible, try to quantify. So there's a lot of different things that you can quantify, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but you can quantify amounts, frequencies, outcomes or accomplishments. And with the tools and techniques, it's definitely a good idea or practice to incorporate the skills that you have within your skills section into the bullet points where you had a chance to use or demonstrate that skill set. Next, overusage. So avoid repetitive language. If you're using the same action verb time and time again, see if there's a way that you can use a synonym or highlight a slightly different skill. So vary your language as much as possible. Next, avoided words. So resume writing style is concise, it's succinct. It doesn't have to be a complete sentence. So you can remove words like a or an and the. So try to do that, see if the meaning still holds without those words. And if it does, you could go ahead and remove them. That can add up and potentially save you some space. Similarly, avoid pronouns and filler words such as adverbs or certain adjectives that might pad your resume but don't add substance and impact for your reader. And lastly, proofread your resume. And again, have other people read that or review that for you as well. They might be able to help you avoid grammatical errors, spelling errors, and typos. So this is a first impression of you as a candidate. It can highlight your writing skills and abilities and show off your attention to detail. So you want to make sure that you've had some other eyes on it, including Center for Career Development staff. I'll also mention later in this presentation an online tool that you can use to get 24/7 feedback on your resume. So again, write detailed, concise statements. No bullet point should go over 1 to 2 lines. So if it is, take a look at it, see if there's a way that you can make it more straightforward and succinct. Lastly, some of the questions that I'll often pose to people or consider as I'm reviewing resumes are the following. So what did you do? What were the steps that you took to perform that action or complete that task? Second, who was your audience? Who are you serving? Who is this task supporting or benefiting? Next, what was the purpose? Why did you do this? What value did it add to the organization, or what was the benefit of your action and contribution? And lastly, actions, outcomes, accomplishments. Make sure that when possible, you're highlighting those or identifying those to your reader. You might not be able to quantify every outcome or accomplishment, and that's okay. We'll take a look at some sample accomplishments in a few slides. But those are some questions that are good to think about, can help you deepen and strengthen your bullet points and make them more specific and impactful. Okay, so I talked a bit about action verbs. This slide just gives you some of the action verbs that you can use. This isn't exhaustive, but if you are finding yourself using helped, maybe you advocated, maybe you guided or intervened or contributed or cooperated. So that, this could be one way that you could start to think about other action verbs that you could use. There is a resume guide that you can access on our website, as well as through the VMOC page within Handshake's resource library. Let's go on to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit here about quantifying. So I mentioned the importance of being specific, of quantifying amounts, frequency, outcome. That level of detail gives additional information to your reader that might be helpful in them understanding your experience and how that experience relates to their hiring needs. If you talk, for instance, about frequency, that lets them know how often did you complete a certain task, how much competency or experience were you able to build in that area. That might let them know how proficient you might be if you were to perform that task in their setting. With amounts that, I can talk to them about the scope or the bandwidth, what you were able to handle in a particular functional area. So on the slide, you'll see potential numbers that you could include. So it could be numerical percentages, maybe it's providing age range about a population that you worked with, or maybe you collaborated with a team and you quantify how many people were on that team, or you were involved in a research study and you provide information about the sample size and demographics. And there are a few accomplishments outlined here in this gray box. I'll actually show you a few more on the next slide, but it could be sales revenue, increase in profit, maybe you've saved the organization money. I think this is an example that I often give, but maybe you're doing responsibilities around social media management or content creation in those spaces or website stuff. Maybe one is increase in page views. or increase in click rate. If it's a newsletter, maybe it's increase in open rate, or number of people that are subscribed to that listserv or newsletter. All right, here are some more sample accomplishments. So again, not every accomplishment or outcome might be able to be quantified, but there are other ways that you can indicate success, positive outcomes, efficacy, and so on. So, for instance, on the slide, developed new and/or innovative strategies or procedures, exceeded expectations, won recognition, maybe was promoted or given increased responsibilities. Maybe you proposed an idea that was adopted and implemented. So there are other ways to show off the impact that your work had and your contributions. I think with the quantifying piece, one other thing that I'll note here is some of that data can be a little tougher to access after you've left an experience. Maybe, yeah, you don't have access to it anymore. Maybe it's tougher to get in touch with the folks who you worked with there. So those are things that as you're going through that experience, noting outcomes, noting specifics, keeping a comprehensive list, record of what you've done can be really helpful. It can make sure that you retain that information, it doesn't become fuzzy over time, and then you're able to share that in the future. Okay, so some examples of putting that into practice. We have a sample research section on a resume here, and you can see some of the best practices that we just discussed. So these bullet points start with a strong action verb, collect and input data, recruit and enroll patients, contacted people, interviewed participants. So in quickly looking down those bullet points, I can get a sense of what were some of the key tasks that that individual performed, what were some of the skills that were being utilized. And then I can see a little bit more about how they did that. So the contacting people, they contacted 300 people. That's a good data point to share. It kind of talks about how big their outreach efforts were or how large they were. We also know about the medium that they used to make that outreach. So they used a phone, and we get a sense of the purpose. So the purpose was to evaluate eligibility for a specific research project that was studying HIV vaccines. So we get a good bit of detail here that provides context and relevant information for the reader. The next example gives an idea of how you could incorporate technology. So that next bullet point interviewed potential participants for medical history, drug use, and sexual history, and behavior to determine eligibility. Used iDataFacts to track information. So they were able to incorporate a skill that was likely included in their skills section within a bullet point where they used it. And that can have value when your resume is being reviewed by a person, but also when it's being reviewed by applicant tracking software. Keywords are weighted more heavily if they're found within a bullet point or an experience. The top example at the BU Medical School, similarly, you can see a technology red cap being mentioned. I can see how many participants were recruited to a study. Some of the purpose behind that work, the purpose of the first bullet point was to enable physicians and researchers to better understand patient conditions and progression. So these are well-constructed bullet points. One more example. So similarly, this individual has experienced tutoring. Another thing you can see here is verb tense. So this is a present and ongoing experience. And this verb is a present tense verb. So any bullet points that fell under this course assistant role should be using present tense verb. If it was past tense for all those verbs. But 500 plus students, that's a good number of students that they were working with. So it's definitely kind of talking about scope. And we have specific languages, programming languages that they were working with the students around, and other concepts. So the reader gets a sense of content knowledge, but also what content they are comfortable facilitating or instructing. And then lastly, what I would take out of this is they critiqued and graded homework for all students within a 4-day period. So this can also speak to some transferable skills. They're able to kind of manage a large volume and to be able to meet deadlines and also kind of get that work done under a short turnaround period. Okay, and one additional sample. So this is a before. So I'll read it. Maybe you can take a moment to think about what you would change or how you think this bullet point could be improved. So the before statement is responsible for after-school activities for international elementary school children. So take maybe just a moment to think about that. Okay, so for the after, things that they did to improve it. So I'll read it through again and then point out some of the things that they did well to improve and strengthen this bullet point. So developed curriculum and organized 2 after-school arts and crafts programs for 50 first grade international students to aid in English speaking skills, development, and community building. So they strengthened the action verb. Responsible for is not strong, action-oriented language. So now I get a sense that they developed, they organized, get a better sense of what skill sets they used. They did mention after-school activities in the before example, but now I have a sense that they were creating curriculum. It was 2 after-school programs that were focused on arts and crafts. So there's some additional level of detail that's been added. And then before, I get a sense that it is elementary school children. Afterwards, though, I know how many children. So it's 50 children. They're first graders. They are international students, which was mentioned before. And now I also get a sense of the purpose. What was the goal of this curriculum and this after-school program? It's to aid in English speaking skills and development and improvement of those, as well as community building. So this is a much more specific, detailed, stronger bullet point. Okay, so this gives you a sense of some content that you should not include. So this is personal information that you shouldn't divulge. Sometimes this can be done incidentally or accidentally, but can definitely lead to bias. You know, in the United States, if a photograph is included, sometimes that will eliminate a candidate from consideration. References are typically provided at a later point in time. So if you move through the interview process and are a finalist, oftentimes an employer will ask for references at that point in time. It is, however, possible that they might be asked for earlier in the process. So timelines can vary there. Other one I want to mention is the salary information. So salary history, it's illegal to ask for it in Massachusetts at this time. However, there are different state laws within the United States. So it's important to know if there are different laws within the state where you are searching for a position. And then this is where it would be your turn. So your turn to take a look at the bullet points you've already written, to add a new experience to your resume, or maybe you're starting from scratch and you're just building that resume for the first time. So let's take a look at them really quickly together. So the first one is, what skill might an employer want you to demonstrate? So for this, you need to do a little bit of information gathering. Maybe learn a little bit about the field that you're planning to pursue, learn about the organization where you're interested in applying, and also really look through that position description carefully. What skills, qualifications, and responsibilities does the employer list? That gives you a really good sense of what you should be drawing attention to and offering examples of in your resume. Second, where have you demonstrated this skill? So that's where the examples come into play. You provide experiences where you've utilized that skill. Next, what action verb highlights those skills? So again, you're starting each bullet point with a strong action verb that shows off the skill that you want to highlight. Demonstrate the task. So talk about how you utilize that skill. And then always, again, end with a result, an outcome, accomplishment, or the purpose or value of what you did. Quantify where possible and incorporate any industry-specific terminology, or if there's even language or keywords from the position description that apply to you and your background, see if there's a way to incorporate similar language to your resume. We talked about this early, but remove pronouns and excessive articles. And if your bullet points begin to get too long, see what can be removed and condensed. Try to keep that bullet point to 1 to 2 lines. Okay, so I wanted to share some review options after you've had a chance to work on your resume and try to strengthen your content. It's great to get feedback, as I mentioned earlier. So there are a number of ways that you can do that. First, you can get instant online reviews via VMock, and I'll give you a few more bullet points on that on the next slide. 2, you can go to drop-in hours for resume and cover letter reviews. And that information will be published on the Center for Career Development website, and those are held during the academic year. And then 3, we also offer appointments. They're 30-minute resume or cover letter appointments, and you can schedule them through Handshake. So VMock, you can see the link here on the page. VMock is a platform where you can upload your resume and you can get automatic feedback on that document 24/7. It gives you feedback on your presentation, the impact of the document, as well as your competencies or skills that you're highlighting. So it is a strict grader. It gives you a score out of 100, but focus more on the practical feedback you get and less on that score, especially as you're starting out. 2, it gives you both system feedback or overall feedback about your resume, but also kind of dives into each bullet point and gives you bullet level feedback as well. And lastly, you get a limited number of uploads in an academic year. That number resets every academic year and you get a fresh batch of uploads, but make sure you maximize each upload. So make as many changes as you can at a time before you upload it again and see what improvement you've made. And VMock is a great tool to use throughout your career journey, but it doesn't replace having a conversation with a staff member or someone in your own network. So definitely consider those other resume review options to discuss your resume beyond the feedback that you get in VMock. But this is a great starting point. And lastly, okay, there we go. And lastly, I wanted to share our contact information. So in this picture, you can see an image of our office space. So this is on the 6th floor at the Yawkey Center for Student Services, just outside Kenmore Square. We're located on the 5th and 6th floors of that building. You can see our email address on the slide, as well as our blog. We have a blog that the CCD staff members contribute to. We also feature posts from students and employers as well. And then our email address is listed there, as well as we have a presence on social media and YouTube. Yeah, and I would encourage you to get in touch with us. We encourage students and alumni to utilize our services frequently and early. We're here to support you both virtually and in person, and we look forward to working with you. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.